All right, we are right on time. We are recording now and we're also live streaming on our MetaMask YouTube channel, which means that we are all set to kick things off. So, hello everyone, and a very warm welcome to each one of you. It's exciting to be all with us on another MetaMask API developer community call. Just to kick things off, my name is Manbir. I work as a developer community manager with Consensus. And I have a bunch of special guests with us today. But yeah, just before that, let's go through the agenda real quick. We are doing a quick round of intros and welcome, followed by the recent API updates that Vardhan would be speaking about along with the rest of the team. And we'll be then going through the MetaMask Improvement Proposal process and an overview on that, followed by an in-progress MIPs. And then we'll be towards the end doing a quick round of Q&A session as well. So that being said, I'll quickly hand it over to Vandan to introduce himself, and then we can, following that, follow the order that we see on the screen. So Vandan, would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Manbir. So yeah, Bundan, lead product for our developer experience team in the MetaMask group. And yeah, I'm excited to share some more with you guys today. I will turn it over to Alex.
Hey, Alex. Just an engineer on the DevX team over here at MetaMask. Been working on the Multichain API primarily, which we will discuss at some point in this call. I guess over to Shane.
Yeah, I'm Shane. I'm also an engineer on the DevX team, and yeah, I worked a little bit on revoke permissions API. So yeah, we'll talk about that a bit later as well.
Perfect. Zach, would you like to go next?
I don't think he's here. We'll go with
I don't think
Jesse
so.
next.
Okay.
Well, I'm an engineer on the DevX team as well, and I'll be talking about EIP 6963 and then some upcoming breaking changes that we're going to have.
Perfect. So I'm not sure Colin or Eric is here, but if they end up joining later, we can introduce them later. But happy to kick things off from here, and we can take things forward with the recent API updates. So over to you, Vandan and team.
Great. Sounds good. We'll just dive into it. I think Colin and Eric might be on their way back from India. So
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, so let's dive into some of the recent changes to our API. And the API is essentially how developers connect to MetaMask. It involves our JSON RPC API, but then there's also some other kind of like ways that developers will access MetaMask, and there's like our Ethereum provider API. So there's some other lower level pieces that we'll touch on as well as part of this. So yeah, this is a method to add NFTs to MetaMask directly. It was released a while ago, but we did want to pull that back up here. So this is maybe, I think, over 6 months ago now that this was introduced as an experimental feature. Previously, this method wallet watch asset was only for ERC20 tokens, but we have sort of tried this experimental option of adding ERC 721 and ERC 1155 types to that method. So you can give this a shot in our extension. So if you fire this method with those types against the extension, it should essentially work there. And we used something called a MetaMask Improvement Proposal to introduce this method. We'll talk a little bit more about those for anyone who's not familiar with them. And so it's an implemented method. It's marked as like a stability level 1, which is experimental. And yeah, it's in the extension client right now, not on mobile yet. But the main kind of benefits of this method are that it's a real alternative to wallet auto detection of these tokens, which are currently limited to Ethereum mainnet inside of the MetaMask wallet. And so if you use this method, there's really no dependency on like making sure third-party indexers pick up the tokens in mind. They essentially just go kind of straight to MetaMask. And there are some folks who use MetaMask who are pretty privacy sensitive and might disable our auto detection. So I think we're one of the wallets that kind of gives a lot of control to the user to turn these things on and off. And that's another reason to incorporate this use this method for those users so that they get a good experience as well.
I'll also interject really quickly that a lot of chains we don't have auto detection available on many chains. So unless you're a chain that is indexed by one of the big indexers that we and ultimately we will be integrating more indexers, but at this point there are many chains where obviously people have NFTs and auto detection is just not an option. So this provides a path for easier than manual entry. So, yeah,
absolutely. And then I think in terms of the way it works is that the name of the method is watch asset, but for these NFTs, it's adding your owned NFTs to MetaMask. So if they're not owned by the user, then it's not necessarily adding those, but it is adding owned NFTs in there. And it's been a success. We've definitely seen a fair amount of use, over almost like 500,000 calls on it since we introduced it. And I would say that it's been popular on alternative, like non-mainnet chains, like Ethereum mainnet. So everything outside of that, all the L2s, we see a fair amount of adoption happening kind of in these new chains. So super exciting on that one. And encourage you all to give it a try. There's a little snippet here. It just is to show what the structure of that method call is. The type would be one of those options that we've listed there. We just kind of put them all in there to give you a sense of what the type options are. And then there's the parameters. There's some that are kind of required depending on what the type is. So it sort of adjusts to the type. But that's the general shape of it. And you can also try it out on our API reference, which has got some interactive capabilities in there. So I encourage you to check that out as well. And let's go on to turn it over to Jesse, who will talk to us about multi-wallet support.
Hello there. So yeah, probably one of the biggest pain points that users and wallet builders have while using dApps is trying to use them with another wallet installed. So the wallet builder community got together and very quickly put together this proposal called EIP 6963, and it provides an alternative discovery mechanism for the window.ethereum provider. So essentially, the exciting thing that this enables is it allows wallets inside dApps that have enabled 6963 to play nicely. So users can now have multiple wallet extensions installed and pick and choose whichever they want to use at a particular time for the dApp. So there are some links if you go to eip6963.org, and you have a couple of wallet extensions enabled that support it. You can see them all in the page playing together nicely. Cool. And then here's just a little example snippet, very kind of naive implementation. of EIP 6963 in a dApp if you were to want to add support to your dApp, or even you could just copy and paste this into console and just see it working. And then this is just a screenshot of EIP 6963 implemented into our test dApp. If you wanted a more fleshed out example of how you might want to implement this in your own dApp. And I can drop links in chat to that repo. And then finally, not related to EIP 6963 exactly, but here are some breaking changes that we have announced. The first three items we are now deprecating, and they weren't previously deprecated. So the chain ID property on the window.ethereum provider, the network version property, as well as the selected address property. Those are being deprecated, and our recommendations for replacing them are to simply make their respective RPC method calls to fetch that data. And then for the network changed event, that is being deprecated. And the alternative for that, we don't have a perfect equivalent. We're recommending that you migrate over to the chain changed event rather than monitoring network version changes. And then finally, this has already been deprecated for several months, if not close to a year now, is net version support in the window.ethereum send method. So send specifically here is the synchronous version that fetches the cached results for only 4 RPC methods, net version being one of them. But we plan on completely removing this, support for net version in this method, not shortly, but alongside this other items that are now deprecated. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, I think we'll dive into a little bit more on MetaMask improvement proposals for anyone who isn't familiar with those quite yet. We'll kind of give a quick overview of this process, like what this is and what the process behind it is. So the purpose of MetaMask improvement proposals is to give our community of developers who build against the API early visibility to plan changes. We want to get developer feedback on what's planned. And then we also ideally are opening it up to developers to propose their own API changes, things that they think would improve the experience on their end or unlock certain capabilities. And so we want to provide a path for our community to make a case for other changes that we might not be may not prioritize or may not know about. So looking for community inputs there. And then the other kind of highlight here is that we want to make sure there's a definitive source of truth. So MIP, the EIP, there's all these standards out there. The standards are definitely an area where we're actively involved. But at the same time, I think what we found is that sometimes it's hard for developers to know exactly what's MetaMask's precise implementation. Some of the standards don't go all the way down to details on everything. They're kind of more high level. Or they change occasionally. So there might be a standard that it moves, and then you're left wondering whether a wallet, has implemented a certain version of that spec or not. So our MetaMask improvement proposals have that definitive source of truth for MetaMask interfaces, and we're using something called OpenRPC specifications to define the API, and so it's very detailed. So that's kind of a key part of the puzzle as well with these proposals. Let's talk a little bit about when you might want to use this process.
Sorry to chime in. I
No.
see a bunch of people requesting presenter or speaker access. So everyone doing that, please note that you can ask your questions in the chat or in the Q&A section. They enable that right now. And yeah, we'll be going through the Q&A towards the end of this call. Cool. But yeah, very, very insightful, Vandan and team.
Yeah, definitely don't lose track of your questions. Let's keep those and come back to them at the end. So yeah, when do you use this API proposal process? So it's mainly for changes that go beyond like bug fixes and documentation improvements. We have a way for submitting into our like public repos if you see something that you think should work a certain way but doesn't work as expected, run into issues, or if you see something in our documentation that's off, you can go to our MetaMask-docs documentation repository. If you go to our docs pages and the footer, there's links to like all these places. So that's another way to kind of find everything. But the other thing is that we do have something called MetaMask Snaps, which is an open beta, which allows you to also extend our API. But with MetaMask Snaps, you don't have to go through any process really, except for we do at the moment have in this open beta, there's like a whitelist. So there's a few steps to kind of get approved to be on that whitelist, but the APIs themselves are not necessarily like checked or need to be like kind of confirmed by our teams. And so there's a lot of power there. At the same time, for a user to get access to those, they have to first install the snap, which then extends our API to be used. So it's not necessarily available to all users. There are also limitations currently in terms of like what you can access from a snap. So the types of capabilities that are there might be still somewhat limited. Although I think the spectrum of capabilities is growing as we speak. Whereas the MetaMask APIs, if you go through this process, those APIs are available to all dApps and could affect all users. So with that kind of access comes some responsibility. And so yeah, if we go to the next slide. So we have most of the group on this call is part of what we're calling our API maintainers. And so we do have to do some stewardship over the APIs, and we use this MetaMask Improvement Proposal process to do that. And the reason for that is that we do need to balance things that sometimes are preferred by like a dApp or a developer with the end user experience. There's some natural tensions there. There's privacy considerations, security, and then there's like just like the long-term direction of MetaMask. We want to make sure that the improvements that we're making sort of like align with our overall direction. And then finally, there's also a desire to retain developer goodwill by avoiding disruptive breaking changes. That's why Jesse was highlighting some of the changes that are happening. We want to make sure if we do make a change that is a breaking change, we're communicating that early so people have time to adjust to it or let us know if there's something critical that they're dependent on that would be broken by that change. We're typically pretty slow to make any changes like this. And retain backward compatibility for quite some time. But that's sort of another thing that we need to look out for in any like API changes. And so then there's really two sources of these improvement proposals. They either come from us, and most of the time the API maintainers are proposing transparently in this MetaMask Improvement Proposal repository, and then are also potentially implementing those themselves. And then we have community proposals that can come in, which are potentially folks outside of the MetaMask org, but there's also some other pockets even within Consensus and MetaMask who are not part of the API maintainer group, who are building things and also are interested in changes to the API. So that we kind of consider those community submissions as well. And there's slightly, the process is pretty similar for both of these paths, even though they're kind of like coming from just different sources. That's something we might refine in the future, because I think when it's coming from the maintainers, there's a few steps that are probably can be done faster. But yeah, that's the idea. And then community submissions, if you submit, it doesn't mean you have to implement it yourself. Basically, if you make the right case for it and you show that there's going to be developers ready to adopt and try out the experimental methods when they're ready, then we can prioritize those for development as well. And then if you do want to develop it, that's an option too. So like if it's not a priority for us, or if we can't get to it in the time frame that is desired, then an external developer can actually contribute as well. And then in terms of the process, yes, we have these submissions. They start off as drafts. They don't have to be perfect. We have like a template for a MetaMask improvement proposal. Sort of do your best to fill it out. But in moving from draft to review readiness, we can help you kind of get there. So we're usually checking in on these proposals every so often and providing feedback on requests. And then essentially once they're ready for review, once there's like a point of stability where we think it's actually going to sort of like most likely be moved to implementation, then we'll post it as last call so that the community has some time to chime in if there's any other final like concerns with it. And then eventually once that settles down, then we'll move it to accepted. And once it's accepted, then generally the spec and the proposal shouldn't change dramatically, unless it's related to like when we get to implementation. If there's some new information that we find, we might make some minor adjustments, but it should be stable at that point. And then once we have it implemented in the product, then it'll move to this implemented stage. So those are the kind of main stages that a MetaMask improvement proposal goes through. And once when we get an API out, usually we will assign this like stability index to it. And so there are methods that usually start off as stability level 1, which is experimental. And then once we feel like they're at a point of stability where lots of developers are starting to rely on them, and we recommend that a developer use the method, then we'll promote that to stability index 2, which is stable. And then of course there's a possibility where we deprecate something and then we'll move that back to 0. So a couple of things that are in process in this pipeline of MetaMask improvement proposals. So the first one is in last call, this wallet revoke permissions, which is under MIP2, is essentially ready for implementation. And so we're checking in to see if anyone has concerns about this one. Generally, it's a pretty non-controversial method, so we don't anticipate too much of a concern there. It's really something that gets paired up with our wallet request permissions method. It just hasn't been there historically. We've implemented MIP1, which was wallet watch asset for NFTs, which is what we touched on earlier. And then we have a couple of items that are in draft right now. There's one on API versioning that is something that we want to introduce into the overall API. And another one that came in as a community submission, but it's within the consensus org, which is wallet swap asset. This is kind of coming from our swaps functionality, and there's a desire to be able to trigger that from a dApp as well. And then one thing that we did want to touch on here is that MetaMask is moving towards a more multi-chain experience end to end, so all the way from the end user experience to the developer like interface. And we plan to create some MetaMask improvement proposals around this effort. Right now, we're closely involved with an organization called Chain Agnostic Standards Alliance, CASA for short. And they have these things called capes that are their own sort of improvement proposals for like sort of cross-chain standards. And they have one which is Cape 25, which defines like a multi-chain API like handshake between Adapt and Wallet. And then there's something called Cape 27, which allows developers to make chain-specific kind of requests. And so we're trying to work with the industry, make it as compatible as possible, while still being sort of precise in our own implementation of this, and using our MetaMask improvement proposals to make sure that everything is like put in front of our developer community, who we're going to expect to adopt this API, and getting feedback there before we fully go off and implement this. So you can look at these standards for now. They sort of point to the general shape of how we're planning to do things, but we'll be posting some MetaMask improvement proposals that will provide a lot more detail on exactly how you would use those with MetaMask. So we anticipate those kind of early next year. So that's what's on the horizon. And yeah, let's talk a little bit more about this last call, MIP, wallet revoke permission. I'll turn it to Shane maybe to touch on this one a little bit. I know there's there's a couple of highlights that he can share there.
Yeah. So revoke permissions is a method to give you the ability to revoke either permissions that you've already granted via request permissions. So right now, I think the only support we have is for ETH accounts there. I believe some of the Snap stuff is coming in the future. But yeah, right now, just ETH accounts can be revoked. So this gives developers a way to actually revoke the permissions from MetaMask, whereas before you would kind of have to fake like a sign out button or something like that with local storage and try to sync it up with MetaMask. But now you can revoke permissions, and now it's a lot easier to keep it in sync with MetaMask if you can actually revoke your permissions and sign out from the website.
Perfect. Yeah, it's a pretty simple shape of the request there, because the ETH accounts is the main kind of permission that we have right now. And this will essentially like remove. It's almost like a full log out. It's not specific to like one account. We are looking at potentially doing that in the future, but for now it's kind of like a sign out analogy. Cool. Let's get into any Q&A, anything that was queued up during the call. I'd love to hear from everyone if they have questions to dive into.
Cool. Yeah, let's do it. So I had a quick question. We briefly spoke about the ERC standards. I think we saw ERC 20, 721, and 1155. But is there any plans to support more ERC types?
You for wallet watch asset, you mean?
Yeah.
It's a good. Currently, those are the primary standards for most assets that anyone uses. I think it would be a good opportunity if there are sort of I mean, so there's probably like extensions of those standards that people are thinking about. Ultimately, if they're extensions, you can use the base standard in that type field. And so I'm not super familiar, but I know there's ERC 721A or something like that. There's where people have modified the base standard. Ultimately, that's I believe the way it's implemented, and I'd have to double check, and it is worth exploring to make sure that our implementation allows for extensions to pass through in that way. And then ultimately, if there are standards that are not derived from one of those three, ERC 20, ERC 721, ERC 1155, it would be a good MIP if you're interested in contributing to extend support for those standards as well. I guess the one of the key reasons why the AIP doesn't support them right now is also that the wallet, in terms of what assets we actually enable users to have, it's really ERC 20s, ERC 721s, and 1155s. Not to confuse having them in your wallet with displaying them in our interface, but what we display in our interface is those three types of assets. So it would involve also extending the wallet to display those as well. But interested in hearing about any up and coming standards that diverge substantially and are worth exploring in terms of adding support to the wallet. But again, all of that, it would be great to hear in the MIP repo. Please, if you have anything like that, submit it in there. Love to see it.
Cool. Quickly scanning through the chat, I see a bunch of questions in the Q&A section. I'm not sure how relevant is this, but someone is saying it would be great if we can disconnect from all connected apps with one click. Please add this feature. So I know we briefly touched upon disconnecting from dApps, I believe on one of the slides, but anything to add there, Vandan?
The question sounds a little bit more like a end user sort of a thing, like control. So like sort of disconnect me from every dApp I'm connected to. So I think that's something for us to maybe take back to the, or if we can get a little more detail on like the specific reason for that, I think it would be useful to share that with our teams that work on the kind of front end experience.
I think also giving the dApps the ability to actually have a sign out button is at least like a step in the right direction there.
Absolutely. Cool. We have another question. EIP 6551 could be an example of another asset. We don't support it today, but we could in the future. Oh, it seems like more of a comment. But anything to add on that?
Well, Shane, happy to, if you want to add to what you said there. I think basically, I mean, we want, there's a balance between like, there's new standards that emerge and just making sure that they're ones that stick around and ones that that the ecosystem actually cares about before we add support, right? Because otherwise there's lots of standards to potentially support, and it ends up potentially consuming a lot of time and energy when they don't actually end up sticking around. But Shane, I don't know if you have anything to add there.
Yeah, I was just giving like an example of one that we don't like support today. But yeah, it definitely does depend on like the actual usage across the ecosystem. And I think Snaps kind of helps with that as well, where we can kind of like shim in some support there first before it actually makes it into the wallet.
Got it. Great. We have a question by Rue. How to submit a community proposal, and is there a forum or a channel, or we could just open a new issue or PR on the GitHub link that you shared?
Yeah, that if I'm understanding the question correctly, for
I
submitting
believe
like
that's for MIPs.
yeah. So you can there's a in that repo there's a contributing doc, and in the README as well. I would just recommend reading through that and the contributing doc, and then there's even a template. There should be adequate sort of documentation for understanding how to submit these proposals. There's the first few are a little bit longer, just partly in order to give people a sense of like what like a fully fleshed out one is. But we would definitely accept and read through any proposals, no matter the length, as long as they're sort of, good faith attempts to contribute. So, don't feel like it has to be like super, you don't have to spend hours and hours and hours, fleshing it out. We're happy if it's a good proposal. We're happy to work with you to get it into the right place. So if you have ideas, that all the documentation in that repo should guide you, and then it would be just opening up PR, and in the way that we submitted the previous MIPs. So.
Awesome. We also have a question by Shane. I believe this was posted when Vandan was speaking. Can you explain why you want to not block phishing smart contracts?
No, that was a question in the chat, which was, can you not block phishing contracts? And I said, why would you not want to block them?
Oh, okay. Got it. Cool.
Unless you're trying to do phishing.
Yeah. I mean, cool. Let me quickly scan through the chat. But I see Eric has joined. Hey, Eric, good to have you with us. Would you like to quickly introduce yourself and add to the conversation or ask any question if you might have?
Hey, guys. Very sorry for joining late. Just got back in from a very long flight. Yeah, my name is Eric Bouchard. I am the MetaMask DevRel for SDK and MetaMask API. And yeah, I just wanted to join to make sure I could be here for the Q&A at the very least. So yeah, that's the only introduction I have so far.
No, awesome. I really appreciate you joining us, Eric, even though you just got back home out of a very long flight here from India. But yeah.
No problem.
Cool.
Yeah, I see some other questions, but I think they may be more related to sort of general questions or
more of end user questions. Yeah.
Cool. Well, yeah, I definitely encourage folks to check out the MetaMask Improvement Proposal repository, and yeah, you'll see that there's some activity there, even amongst folks who are under the consensus or MetaMask umbrella. So we're kind of testing out the process there pretty heavily right now, but definitely are interested in seeing community submissions come in. So even if it looks a little quiet, feel free to chime in there. Don't be afraid.
Perfect. And yeah, I mean, any suggestions on how to write good proposals, like what all people should add to that to make it just more clear and just to make sure that it goes through?
Yeah, I think one of the key things that gets typically overlooked is like a little bit of background on the question of why do you need this thing? and a little bit of elaborating on like why is it important, right? Because again, we have when it comes to implementation, it sort of costs us a fair amount to spend the time to take one of these APIs and sort of build them out, make sure everything's sort of solid, secure, and doesn't have any negative side effects. And so we do need to have some sense of like what's the impact it'll have for the industry. Doesn't have to specifically be for MetaMask. We recognize that sometimes there's emerging areas in the industry. Like we're not going to sort of invent or be aware of everything. And so we definitely want to hear that, understand how us making changes could potentially unlock some part of the industry, and support that. So provide, some background on like the sort of reasoning of why the sort of technical change is requested. And then the other part, I mean, feel free to use like ChatGPT or something, like, if you need help sort of filling in some content, that's totally fine to get like a sort of first round in. But yeah, again, don't feel too concerned if there's some areas you leave empty. It may be because you're not sure, or if you sort of need help filling in the other parts, we're happy to facilitate that a bit. So it doesn't have to be perfect. Do your best to describe kind of, the reasoning why. Make sure that there's some audience who's going to adopt it. So we want to make sure there's going to be adopters. If we go through the work of building an API and nobody's using it on the other side, then that doesn't help. But if you can rally other teams, developers to kind of opt into saying, when this gets to experimental, like we'll try it out, then that also gives it a little more confirmation on, from our side that this is something worth building out.
Cool. Just keep it a bit clear, concise, and add as many details as you can. Things would be pretty good to take forward from there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And we just posted we have a channel in the Consensus Discord now for the API. It's mm-wallet-API. So if there's just sort of like general questions and you don't want to post them into the repo, you can go there too. That's more for just like if you run into an issue or just have these general questions on something, then it's a good place to get support.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. I do see another question, but it seems like it's more of a generic one or a not 100% focus on the API or MIPs. But is there a place where I can use a reference on compliance, security, and related to financials industry? Need to know how to convince my clients, and is this something that is always asked? So anything to add on that one then?
I mean, it sounds like if I read between the lines, they're sort of saying like, if I want to convince my clients to use like sort of blockchain technology or, wallet, stuff. It sounds like it might be good for them to either connect with our institutional side and MetaMask institutional. Or maybe DevRel might have some connection to make there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know if Eric or anyone has thoughts on that one.
So one thing I think I have been getting from the hackers at the hackathon is when talking to them about the MetaMask improvement proposals was kind of asking how to get involved. I know that we've already given the information here. There's a repo, correct, and a discussions board around that, and you've probably already given that information out.
Correct. Yeah, we posted the links to that, and let people know. Especially, I think the discussion section of it is a little underutilized. So like, there's an area for just general questions. So if you have like an idea, if you're at the idea stage, it's a great place to just like still go to the discussion section, post your like wild idea, and see what the response is. and then yeah, maybe from there we'll encourage you to create a proposal. So yeah, it's easy to get started. You don't have to kind of create a fully baked proposal just to engage with us.
Yeah,
I think
definitely. Yeah, go ahead.
the only
Alex.
other one that I get kind of on the consistent and got several times in India is kind of wanting to know about like what is MetaMask's plans in and around account abstraction. So typically, I think the answer for that right now is kind of more around snaps than it is the MetaMask API.
Mm-hmm.
But is there anything I think developers should know about kind of what's coming in the MetaMask API, you know, in the near future? And is there anything in and around kind of either multi-chain or account abstraction that maybe that would have any kind of place in the MetaMask API?
The quick thing also is, so we touched on the fact that multi-chain API is on the horizon. So that's kind of in the future upcoming like APIs that we're kind of working on behind the scenes, but we'll eventually kind of push out in public. And I know that we've been there have been conversations around how like there's another team kind of evolving how we think about accounts, and I think that this multi-chain API will probably play nicely with that once the account capabilities are you know, come to fruition. I don't know, Alex or Shane, if you guys have heard anything else related to account abstraction.
Yeah, like you said, there is some there's like at least one team focusing on that right now, but the future work we're doing on multi-chain should play in nicely with that. So yeah, we're all trying to make all of that happen, basically.
Yeah, I don't have much to add there. Account abstractions definitely, you know, I think probably next to multi-chain enablement, like as like the highest priorities. And so, yeah, I mean, there's some pending, you know, EIPs in the ecosystem that are related to that. Like, I can't remember the number, but like converting your EOA into like a 4337 style account. But anyway, there's people. This team is definitely not directly involved in that, but there's a lot of work being done to make it all sync up nicely and make the multi-chain account abstraction world happen ASAP. And they might not happen at exactly the same time, but there's a lot of cool, exciting stuff on the horizon.
Yeah, so the general kind of work in and around the API is more focused on multi-chain, but as for account abstraction, probably they should look forward to something coming from like snaps in the near future.
That, and I think there will be some elements of it that seep into the multi-chain API. So we're kind of coordinating with those teams to make sure that what they're doing works well with the multi-chain API as well.
Nice, thanks.
So hopefully all the streams come together nicely next year.
Cool, nice. I know we briefly spoke about how snaps could allow people to add their own APIs and functionality, but I believe a lot of people didn't know that snaps also allows to extend the functionality of MetaMask API as well. So Vandan, anything to add there? What are we exactly looking for in terms of people to contribute here?
Yeah, probably the just like some of the highlights there is that so one thing to look at with snaps is there's these endowments that they have. So there's certain powers that they can have, and those are limited right now. So there is a set of like capabilities that they have. But if you can essentially, if you want to create a snap that provides an API extension and uses the can use the existing endowments to do that, then like essentially you can extend the API today through snaps without a whole lot of like overhead. I think there might be, I'm not as tied into snaps, but I think there is some like auditing that has to happen for snaps to be included today. So there's a little bit of like overhead. Long term, I think the idea is that this becomes more of like a permissionless environment. So I think the sort of overhead of coordinating would be lowered, and external developers could sort of like create the thing on their own end to end. Whereas with the improvement proposals, there's more interconnections with the rest of the code base, and so there's just sort of naturally like a fair amount of like complexity in trying to create APIs. And I think the Snaps team, they have like a whole roadmap of new endowments that they are working to release. So there are changes coming. So I definitely keep tabs on that if, to see if there's a route there. I think it ideally should be the faster path, though it is more limited, right? Like you have to have the Snap added as an end user. So first you have to kind of get Snap adoption, and then for the users who have the Snap, then they would have this new API method, available for dApps to interact with. So that could sort of be pretty powerful. But again, if those endowments are not enough right now, and you don't sort of see the capabilities coming in time for some need, then and it needs to be, if there's basically something that a developer feels is important enough that all MetaMask users should have it, and all dApps should be able to access, an extra API, then this is the probably the right forum. The MetaMask Improvement Proposal would be the right place to ask for something like that.
Yeah, and since you mentioned about the MetaMask Snaps allow list process, Vandan, I gave a presentation last week itself during the India Blockchain Week, so happy to add some clarity on that. So there's a Snaps marketplace where we have already listed out more than 40 snaps, and if you're building a snap, it needs to go through a whole allow list process, and in order for it to pass through the allow list process, every snap needs to be audited. And post auditing, we take the checksum of the code base just so that the developers are not able to change the code, and to prevent any say security concerns or anything of that sort happening to the end users. And once everything is done, we just simply list the snap on the marketplace. But yeah, that's a brief summary. There's a lot going on in the middle of the process as well. But I believe Eric might want to add a bit to that.
To the Snaps allow list process?
Yeah.
I mean, the only thing I'd have to add is that, in order to even kind of get to that place, you really need to be building on snaps, have a pretty fleshed out version of your snap, and then be active on the snaps discussions board, talking with the team and sharing with them, and especially like the DevRel from snaps, Ziad, probably talking with Ziad about what you guys are building, and then they'll be able to kind of take you from there and make sure that you're working through the process. But it's a lengthy process, and it involves with kind of being involved in building snaps first, kind of on the development side using Flask, and then getting your snap to a place where it's production ready. And then there's a list of kind of steps from there that you'd probably need to go through and work directly with the snaps team. But yeah, that discussion board, if you're building a snap and you're not a part of that discussions board, that's really the first place to go. And there's a link in that repository. I don't have the name right off the top of my head, but it's something around like it's at the top of the directory, top of the repo, and it's about taking your snap and getting it published process. I can try and look it up real quick and post it in the chat what the name of the link is. And it's just a walkthrough of everything you would need to kind of check off.
Awesome. Thanks for adding the context, Eric. We have a question by Sherko. Can you add the search option in the network selection to the mobile application in the next update? So I believe this is more of a feedback than a question. I'll pass it on to the product teams.
Seems like it would be nice in both builds.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Cool. In the chat, I don't see a bunch of other questions, but anything to add? Vandan, Alex, Eric, Jesse, or
I think
Shane?
I think the main thing would be to definitely check out. And maybe I should provide the links here for Cape 25. And actually, I'll just share Cape 25. But kind of once you go there, it sort of interconnects with everything else. And let's see, should I do this in the chat? I'll do it in the chat.
And also, these are all the reference links that you can check out. I'll also paste these in the chat.
Yeah, so multi-chains kind of, I mean, that's the majority of what our team's been working on heavily. And yeah, this is going to be a significant change. You know, again, we've mentioned about being sensitive about breaking changes. So we will have backward compatibility. We're not going to force everyone to move forward to the multi-chain API, but there will be a lot of like new capabilities there that also tie into the user experience inside of MetaMask. I think you'll just get an overall better experience if you build against this multi-chain API that's around the corner. So I would just encourage developers to sort of like take a peek at that, see what's coming there. Like the whole idea of like being able to talk to multiple chains at the same time. That's really the paradigm shift right now. Everything is like there's this coordination that happens between the dApp and the wallet where you have to sort of ask for a certain network to be selected, and then once the users switch to that network, then you can do certain actions within that like networked context. So that whole kind of dance will change and generally kind of go away, where it's more just what action on which chain do you want to do, and you can trigger that from the dApp side, and we'll handle that in the UI accordingly without having to ask the user to do chain switching and everything. So that's start thinking about that now if you can, thinking about how you might adapt your experience, your application around that concept, and then yeah, we'll have more to share in the new year around what we're working on that front, and we'll be as transparent as possible, you know, once we have some picture of what that API will look like. So you'll have time to kind of get your heads around it and sort of ask questions, raise any concerns with that interface. We definitely want to make sure we get it right and works for our developer audience.
Awesome. I see Sherko requested to speak, but again, we're not expecting more of speakers to join. But if you have any questions, please feel free to put them up in the chat. We have another 1 or 2 minutes and we can go through them fine. But again, anything to add, Alex, Jesse, Shane, or Eric?
Nothing from me.
I know I was late to the discussion around EIP 6963. I just wanted to know if there were any questions. I think the kind of only update that I have is, and Vandan might have covered this already since I wasn't here earlier, but our SDK, it does kind of support EIP 6963, but not in the way I think that you would expect it to, because it's a multi-injection provider kind of way of detecting what wallets are installed in the browser. but I would be looking towards either WAGMI, which has a good implementation of it already, which connects to multiple wallets, and then Web3 Onboard, which is another kind of connector library that will be supporting EIP 6963 in the near future, which already supports the MetaMask SDK, which allows you to connect to MetaMask Mobile. Yeah, Vandana, was there anything beyond that that maybe wasn't answered or that you didn't go over?
No, I don't think we got any questions about that one, and it is important. I think developers definitely need to kind of implement it on their end as well. So it's like we've done our part on the wallet side, and I think as an industry, like most of the wallets have moved in this direction, which was kind of a significant undertaking, but it's cool that we're here now. And then yeah, there's just like I think some work devs have to do to actually like get it set up on their side. And I know there's libraries that are available that have support for 6963, although I think it's still kind of like early in terms of like library adoption and everything. So that we'll see, I'm sure we'll see that kind of trickle through. And until then, there's like some kind of examples that are available to look into, so you can kind of custom code it, as well.
I know we're trying to get some either React and or vanilla JavaScript kind of like raw examples of using EIP 6963 from a developer perspective done before the end of the month. But I think the one I would look at if I was a developer would probably be WAGMI. So again, they're integrating it, but also they have some pretty good examples in their GitHub of like applications which try to implement it for various wallets. So I would just take a look into, you could probably just search WAGMI EIP 6963 repositories or examples, and there's a pretty decent one inside the WAGMI GitHub. And then from there, maybe you look out for any information coming from our team and our DevRel team in the coming month for like overall what you need to know, and any example code that we can go ahead and give out. Yeah,
I posted the MIPD link, the WAG.
Oh, perfect.
So,
yes,
yeah.
That's the one I'm talking about.
Cool. Great.
Nice.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Vandan and Eric. I don't see a lot of other questions, and we are on time. But yeah, thanks for joining, everyone. It's been a pleasure having you all with us. And thanks, Vandan, Alex, Jesse, and Shane, and Eric for adding a lot of value to this conversation. It's been very insightful. Yeah, as always, I think someone also asked this in the chat, if there's a regular cadence for this community calls, but we do these on a monthly or a bi-monthly basis. So definitely do check out community.consensus.io. That's where we list out all these community calls. Do follow us on Twitter and our Discord server. That's where we post these community calls. So yeah, stay tuned for the future community calls. But this has been the last community call of this year. So it's been a real pleasure. And yeah, until next time, thanks everyone, and hope to see you soon.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.